Płaszów concentration camp, 1942 to 1943. Chapter 9. The Nazis snatched me up one day when I was at work. I was still working at the tailor shop in Krakow, hoping that would save me from the deportations, but my work there ended up being the reason I was taken. The tailor shop at Płaszów, a nearby labor camp, needed more workers, we were told. So we were taken. I had known this day would come. In the days and weeks after my parents were deported, the rest of my family had gone too. Uncle Moshe had disappeared while on a work detail. Uncle Abraham and Aunt Fela were pulled from their home in a deportation. Cousins Sala, David, and their 2 boys while in line for bread. Aunt Gisela and little Zitka went for a voluntary selection in Zgoda Square in hopes that the Nazis meant what they said about resettlement. By the summer of 1942, only I remained. The sole member of my family left in the Krakow ghetto. I thought I'd be ready for it when they took me away, but I wasn't. They loaded us into a truck, and all the horror stories I'd heard suddenly became real to me. Were the Nazis lying to us? Were we going to die? Were we really being taken to the woods to be shot? I panicked, looking for a way out. Out of the truck, out of Płaszów, out of this nightmare that had already swallowed my parents and everyone I loved. But just outside the truck were Nazis with machine guns. They didn't even have to point them at me for the message to be clear. It was either go where this truck was taking me, or die here on the streets of Krakow. I had sworn to myself I would survive, so I made the choice that kept me alive, if only for the moment, and took a seat on the truck. The women I worked with begged to be able to tell their families back in the ghetto goodbye, to tell them where they were being taken, but the Nazis didn't listen. They just poked them with their rifles and threatened to shoot them if they didn't get in the truck. The women sobbed the whole way to Płaszów, but I didn't. I was gripped by fear, but I wasn't sad to leave the ghetto. All my family were gone, and I had no more possessions of any value. There was nothing left for me there. The truck did, after all, take us to Płaszów. It was a labor camp just a few kilometers outside Krakow. The truck stopped just outside the camp's gate, where more Jews were being unloaded from trucks. I didn't know where the others had come from. Krakow? One of the villages outside the city? Somewhere else? Some of them carried suitcases and bags. Others, like us, had nothing. Schnell! Schnell! A German soldier barked at me. Quickly, quickly! He struck me in the back with the butt of his rifle, and I stumbled forward into the dirt. I scraped the skin off my palms trying to catch myself, but that was nothing compared to the screaming pain in my shoulder. I got to my feet and brushed the grit from my bleeding hands as we were herded inside. Płaszów was a series of long, low buildings separated by dirt roads and surrounded by barbed wire. The few other men and I were separated from the women. A guard ordered us to turn over any valuables, and I gave him the few złote I had in my pockets. After that, we were ordered to take off our clothes. Reluctantly, I removed my dirty, too short shirt and pants and added them to a pile. Another soldier gave me a pair of wooden shoes and a blue and gray striped prisoner uniform made out of a thick canvas material. I put them on and held my arms out to look at myself in my new clothes. Now I am officially a prisoner, I thought. I almost laughed. In truth, I had been a prisoner since the Nazis walled off the Krakow ghetto. But now I finally looked the part. After we were all given uniforms, we were marched to the Płaszów tailor shop by another prisoner wearing a yellow armband. He was a capo, he told us, a prisoner who'd been put in charge of other prisoners by the Nazis, so they wouldn't have to deal with us all the time. We were to do what he told us, he said, or we would feel the sting of the wooden club he carried. All of us knew enough by now to follow along and do what we were told without speaking. There were thousands of prisoners at Płaszów, most wearing a yellow Star of David on their uniforms to show they were Jews. But there were other prisoners too, I soon learned, all of whom wore different colored triangles. The red armbands belonged to political prisoners, green meant criminals, black armbands were worn by gypsies, though there were very few of those, as they were usually killed straight off. Purple meant Jehovah's Witness. Homosexuals wore pink. And all of them had a little letter in their triangle to tell you where they were from. P meant Poland, or Pole. T meant Czechin, or Czech. J meant Yugoslavian, or Yugoslavian. There was no letter in the Jewish stars, though. No matter where we had come from, we had no country. We were only Jews. As I scanned the prisoners along the way to the tailor shop, I thought I saw a familiar face. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Uncle Moshe. Uncle Moshe, I called. Uncle Moshe, it's me, Yannick. Moshe looked up, not in excitement, but in horror. His eyes were wide and he shook his head at me quickly before turning his gaze back to the ground. Who called there? Who was that? Our capo barked, bringing my group to a halt. The prisoners looked back over their shoulders to show it hadn't been them, and I looked back too, as though trying to see who had called out. One of the men behind me gave me an angry glare, then turned as if to see if he could find the source of the yell behind him. The prisoners will remain silent unless spoken to, the capo told us, and he struck a man in the back with his club. As the capo herded us the rest of the way to the tailor shop, my face burned with shame. I was such a fool. Someone had been hurt because I'd called out to Moshe. I resolved then and there not to speak again until I could find Moshe and talk to him privately. We worked all day in the tailor shop, doing what we had done in Płaszów. Only now, there were more SS guards, and we were often beaten for no other reason than because we were Jews. I saw one man struck so hard in the head with a club that he fell off his stool and didn't get up again. He was dragged away and never returned. And suddenly I understood why the Płaszów tailor shop needed new workers, and always would. That night we were marched to our barracks, where we were each given a small piece of bread and a bowl of watery soup. I was just finishing my meager meal when Uncle Moshe found me. Yannick, he said. He glanced around to make sure our barrack capo was gone, then pulled me into a hug. I hadn't hugged someone in so long that I was almost too stunned to embrace him back. Moshe held me away from him to look me over, then pulled me close again. I'm sorry I couldn't greet you this morning, but no doubt you've seen what they do to anyone who speaks out of turn. I nodded. Yannick, we haven't much time, he whispered. Listen closely. Here at Płaszów, you must do nothing to stand out. From now on, you have no name, no personality, no family, no friends. Do you understand? Nothing to identify you, nothing to care about. Not if you want to survive. You must be anonymous to these monsters. Give your name to no one. Keep it secret. In here, Uncle Moshe said, tapping his heart with his fist. Are my parents here? I asked him, daring to hope. If Moshe was alive, why not my mother and father? Moshe shook his head. I am sorry, boy. No. Unless they were taken to another work camp, they are most likely dead. And Płaszów is where they bring most of us from Krakow, being so close. My legs felt wobbly. I had to sit down on my bunk, or I would have collapsed. I had known my parents might be dead. There were the rumors, after all, about where people went when they were taken. But I suppose I'd never let myself really and truly believe it until now. I didn't try to stop the tears that filled my eyes and coursed down my cheeks. Moshe sat beside me and put a hand on my knee. But you are alive, boy. There is a blessing in that. You're the only other one of us to survive. I suddenly realized what Moshe was saying. Aunt Gazella? Little Zitka? I asked. His wife and daughter. Moshe's own eyes teared up, and he quickly wiped them with the backs of his hands. Dead, he said. They could not work, so the Nazis shot them. I asked about my other uncles and cousins, but Moshe shook his head. You and I are the only ones left. You must show them you can work, boy, so you can keep living. I have a job in the tailor shop, I said, sniffling. Good. Good, shouted. Roll call, Moshe said, and he stood. We must all go and line up to be counted. Remember, you are no one. You have no name. You do not speak. You do not look at them. You do not volunteer for anything. You work, but not so hard they notice you. Gisela, Zitka, your parents, Oscar and Mina. They are dead and gone now, Yannick, and we would grieve for them if we could. But we have only one purpose now. Survive. Survive at all costs, Yannick. We cannot let these monsters tear us from the pages of the world. I nodded, wiping away my own tears, and followed Moshe to the open field in the camp where roll call was taken. We were lined up in row upon row while the Nazis checked the numbers on our uniforms against the tally on their clipboards. I realized then they would beat us and starve us and shoot us like we didn't matter, but they would always keep track of us. While soldiers worked their ways up and down the lines checking us off, one man in a crisp SS officer's uniform and tall riding boots walked among the prisoners, twitching a riding crop against his legs. Two sturdy-looking German shepherd dogs followed along behind him. The SS officer stopped in front of the prisoner beside me and suddenly commanded his dogs, "Attack! Attack! Kill the Jew!" The two dogs were calm as pets one moment. In the next instant, they became rabid killers. They leaped at the man and took him down in their jaws. The man screamed for mercy and then for help as the dogs bit and tore at him right beside me. I wanted to help, to fight back, but Moshe glanced back at me with a warning in his eyes, and I remembered. I was no one. I had no name. They must not notice me. So I stared straight ahead at the ground, just like everyone else, silent and still as the man beside me was ripped apart. When he stopped moving and stopped crying out, the SS officer shot the man through the head with his pistol. Gert looked into our faces, daring one of us to react, then walked away laughing. That was how I was introduced to Commandant Amon Gert. When roll call ended, Moshe went to his barrack and I went to mine. The man beside me hadn't been the only man to die at roll call. Another was shot, supposedly for not smacking his cap against his leg with enough to snap when doffing it for one of the soldiers. I felt as though I had survived a battle. "What's that make the score?" I heard someone ask. It was one of the men who had already been in the camp before I arrived. "Gert 7, Jews 0, another man told him. "What's that?" I asked. "How many Jews Gert has killed since you've been here?" "No," the man said. "How many Jews Gert has killed today?" Chapter 10. Amon Gert